Some 20 years ago, Luke scanned the streets of Singapore looking for heroin dealers.
If I didn't have money, I could buy in those small tubes. That's like $15 a half tube, and that would last me maybe half a day. And then I would go and look for more money to buy the rest.
Perhaps that was a mixed blessing for him because Luke was never caught with enough drugs to be convicted of trafficking. But had he would have faced hanging.
Singapore is famous for its excellent planning. That skyline, for instance. Well, its drug policy is no different. Instituted in the early 90s, it has resulted in drug-related arrests dropping by some 85%, according to the government. The death penalty for drug trafficking, however, is at odds with other countries and organizations. And despite campaigning by foreign peoples and organizations against this death penalty, non-Singaporean traffickers are still learning that when it comes to Western lives, they are no more valuable when we're talking about drugs in Singapore.
Van Nguyen is a good example of that, an Australian who was transiting through Singapore and was caught with drugs, then hanged almost 1 year ago this month, despite cries from Australia for clemency.
Stay clear from Singapore if you have drugs. And we tell you up front. Right? That's part of the rule of law, you see. The laws are clear, they are published, and the punishments are clear. So you clearly take a risk upon yourself if you breach our laws.
Senior Minister of State for Home Affairs Ho Peng Ki is one of the country's top cops and leads the country's 4-part drug program. He does not waver on his country's penalties.
Foreigners who come here must also know that they will be treated same as Singaporeans. Right? There is no differential treatment. That's the position we take in Singapore.
Joseph, are you ready? Because we have...
M. Ravi, a well-known lawyer in Singapore who has defended those on death row, disagrees.
Tend to think that foreigners are treated much better than locals. With regards to Van Nguyen's case, the Australian government asked that Van's mother would be allowed to touch him, and he was given the opportunity to touch his mother. Whereas Shanmugam's case, when Madam Lakshmi, Shanmugam's mother, who's Singaporean, was pleading to the authorities to do the same, to touch his son, she was not allowed.
All said, few foreigners have escaped hanging when it comes to drug trafficking, and even fewer Singaporeans. Luke tells of friends and fellow drug users who paid the ultimate price.
2 actually. And yeah, we talk about it, but that was about it.
They were the prelude to the 400 people Amnesty International says were hanged in Singapore since 1991, giving Singapore the highest execution rate per capita in the world. The question, though, is whether crimes such as drug trafficking have waned as a result of the country's tough enforcement policy. And according to United Nations statistics, crime numbers have gone down, and in recent times, Singapore has had crime rates less than 1/4 of the United States and on par with Japan. Ho says it sends a message to would-be traffickers.
You are really the purveyor of that evil. You are causing the scourge. You are causing lives to be destroyed. You are causing families to be disrupted. You are also causing deaths in some cases.
It's that rationale that has prompted the government to enforce some of the strictest drug laws in the world.
Of course, it's a very tiny amount to take a man's life, especially 15 grams of heroin. And then what is the difference between 14.9 and 15? So it's 0.1% you convict a person's life. And here, cannabis 500 grams is the limit.
But enough to be cut into thousands of hits, argues Ho, much more than a single user can consume.
Many, many lives will be destroyed. Many families will be destroyed by this amount of drugs. That's the message. And that's why we are tough.
And who are witnesses to this murder? The government of Australia and Singapore.
But it's the effect of that tough approach to drugs that is fueling this debate.
Fresh wounds were around his neck. I rushed to the funeral parlor, had to recover his body because the family didn't have the money to do a proper funeral.
M. Ravi's close viewing of bodies after hanging is part of the reason he continues to fight what appears to be a David and Goliath battle against the government's death penalty.
To take the body to funeral parlor, there I had the opportunity to see that the mother was climbing on the hearse to recover the son because the wounds were all fresh and there was a clear laceration, you know, and there was so much of blood coming out.
If the graphic descriptions personify one side of the debate, perhaps Luke personifies the other. The recovered drug user is now on track to become an ordained minister, though he still struggles with Ravi and Ho's arguments on capital punishment.
As a Christian, of course, I take seriously the fact that the taking of life is never an easy choice for anybody. Yeah? But at the same time, as a Christian, I have learned that we ought to submit to our authorities in that aspect.
There is one thing that Ravi and the senior minister can agree on, and that is that traffickers from around the region and the world should think twice before coming to the Lion City. Richard Lui, CNN, Singapore.